Okay, this lesson is on metric conversions for area and volume. Before you access this lesson, it's a good idea to have a look at the lesson at Key Stage 4 site on metric to metric conversions. So let's just remind ourselves of those metric to metric conversions for length anyway. We have 1 centimetre is equal to 10 millimetres. We've got 1 metre is equal to 100 centimetres. And we've got 1 kilometre is equal to 1,000 metres. Now what we're doing now is we're looking at area and volume conversions. So if we just look at this square here, just to try and explain this conversion rates that I've put up here. If you imagine that this was 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre, what we've actually got there is 10 millimetres by 10 millimetres. So the area of that square is either 1 centimetre square. Do you remember how we calculate the area of a square? Just the length times the width, so that's 1 times 1. But we've got 10 times 10 millimetres, which makes 100 millimetre squares. And that's where that conversion comes from. Now the same we can apply with a metre square. So if you imagine a metre square would be 1 metre by 1 metre, which is 100 centimetres by 100 centimetres. So to work out the area of that square, we'd do 100 times 100, and that's why we end up with 10,000 centimetre squares. So if you imagine 1 kilometre square, we've got 1,000 metres by 1,000 metres, and if we multiply those two together, we end up with 1 million square metres. So now that we know the conversions for area, let's just look at these two questions. It just says change 8 square metres into centimetre squares. The common error is just to multiply that by 100 because you know that 100 centimetres make 1 metre. But remember, we're talking about area here. We're talking about squares. So what am I going to do to the 8? I'm literally, if I'm changing it to centimetre squares, need to multiply it by 10,000. So that would be 8 times the 10,000, which makes 80,000 metre squares. If you look at this next one, I'm going to change 9.3 centimetre squares into millimetre squares. Common error is just to multiply it by 10 because you think 10 millimetres make 1 centimetre. But remember, because we're in squares, we're going to multiply it by 100 because 1 centimetre square makes 100 millimetre squares. So this would be 9.3 multiplied by 100, which makes 930 millimetre squares. Let's have a look at volume now. Okay, so if you just look at this cube that I've got here, if you imagine it was 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre, then what you've actually got, if we just look at this dimension here, 1 centimetre, 1 centimetre, 1 centimetre. If I convert them into millimetres, that means I've got 10 millimetres, 10 millimetres, 10 millimetres. And remember how we find the volume of a cube? All we need to do is multiply the length by the width, okay, by the height. So we're doing 10 times 10 times 10. And it would turn into 1,000 millimetre cubes is equivalent to 1 centimetre cube. Same applies if we looked at 1 metre cubed. We'd have 100 by 100 by 100. So we'd multiply those 3 dimensions together and we end up with 1 million centimetre cubes is equivalent to 1 metre cubed. And the same would apply if we'd really gone bigger and we looked at 1 kilometre cubed in relation to metre cubes. That's a seriously big number, okay? So let's look at these two questions. Change 4.2 centimetre cubes into millimetre cubes. Again, the temptation is just to multiply by 10 because people think there's just 10 millimetres into 1 centimetre. But remember, we're dealing with volume. So what we're going to do, we're going to multiply it by 10,000. So it's 4.2 multiplied by 10,000, which gives me an answer of 42,000 millimetre cubes. If you look at this next question, we've got 5 metre cubes and I'm converting them into centimetre cubes. So remember, 1 metre cube is equivalent to 1 million centimetre cubes. So my answer would be 5 times a million, which is 5 million centimetre cubes. Hopefully now you feel comfortable and be able to convert units, okay, when we're dealing with area and when we're dealing with volume. Thank you.